All right. It's Thursday, March 27th, 12 p.m., and we are gathered here with Cindy Krupp's I Am the Open Door, or I Am an Open Door. And this is Finding Truth Everywhere, where we each week we take a look at a video, a conversation, or an interview or podcast, something usually on YouTube, and then we discuss it. And this week we are looking at a really intense conversation between Bernard Kastrup and Francis Lucille. It's a dialogue about computers and basically whether computers can be conscious or not. And there's so much in this um, conversation that I almost don't know where to begin. Um, So I'll start. I'm going to actually start with A Course in Miracles and start. Um, I wonder if Sandra's going to join us because I've been thinking a lot about Cindy's saying that on Tuesday she said everything in A Course in Miracles is true. And I totally agree with that. I mean, words get in the way, but I just want to um, I just want to turn us, I know Patricia's just joining us, so I want to turn us to something that I've actually mentioned a couple of times. I don't know why, I've just been called upon to, but it's on page 201 of the Purple Book. Um, and you don't have to get it, but if you want to get it, please do. So page 201 starts section 3 of chapter 5, which is the voice for God. The voice for God, which is what? The Holy Spirit, the great communicator. Oh, Richard can probably tell me 1,000 different names for what the Holy Spirit is. The Holy Spirit is, I call the Holy Spirit the key code because the Holy Spirit speaks across all different languages, right? All different ways of, it's the great interpreter. Anyway, if you're on page 201 of the Purple Book, I'm looking at the very first sentence in paragraph 2, which says, God is not in you. You are part of him, or you are part of God. And that is a very important distinction. And it's really the way that this whole conversation with Kastrup and Lucille starts. So I'm going to begin with that, and then we can just take off from there. So they begin with this idea of what they call, and I'm just going to put the words out there, but don't worry about the words, panpsychism. And probably some of you know the definition better than I do, but panpsychism is the idea that everything contains consciousness, its own consciousness. So plants have their own consciousness, and animals have their own consciousness, and clouds have their own consciousness, right? And that's sort of a form of panpsychism. And what they start out and they say, if a common mistake that people make is that if consciousness underlies everything, then everything has its own consciousness. And what they say is just because we have a noun or a word for something doesn't mean it is conscious, although that which makes up the noun or the word, yes, that which makes up the thing does have consciousness. So all inanimate matter is part of the consciousness of nature. So an object might not be conscious, but something within that inanimate object is a part of consciousness as a whole. And that's where they say computers are like this. So there might be something that makes up the computer that has consciousness, like an atomic structure or I'll just use that. But the computer doesn't have consciousness on its own. So they ask the question, what is an object? Do objects exist? Right. And that's kind of how they begin this whole thing. And so Kastrup, was it Kastrup? He says, I might imagine a green elephant in my mind, right? But does that green elephant have consciousness of its own? Obviously, it doesn't, right? So it exists. It does exist, but it exists only relative to my consciousness. It doesn't have any consciousness of its own. And then they ask, does my hand have consciousness? Or is it related to my body? Or does my body have consciousness? Right? And does the dinner table have consciousness? He goes on and they say you can recognize the absurdity of this, carrying out this thing. And then they come to, I'm sorry if I'm not being very clear about this. Raise your hand at any point in time. They basically say that we have projected our own conceptual structure onto consciousness. And Kastrup uses nature with a capital N as the equivalent of consciousness. He calls it nature. So what they're essentially saying is that we cannot understand God, source, consciousness, nature, the ultimate nature, because we're just projecting our own concept of reality onto it. And we can't really understand anything beyond what the context of our own reality. Does that make sense?
Amy, can you say that again? And then Mel has her hand up because I think my mind just tried to push it out and I lost it.
Okay. Essentially, what they said was we project our own conceptual structure. They use the term structure, that we could use the term our idea of reality. We project it onto what we think is beyond us, what we think is source, what we see of as reality with a capital R or consciousness with a capital C. But consciousness or nature is beyond our limited awareness.
Can
Right?
you equate that to like our view of what God is as the man with the white beard sitting on a, because that's what we've been taught through religion. Is that one way of, that
Yes, that's a really simplistic way of looking at it. It's a really simplistic way of looking at it. Um, but yeah, that would be, that would work. I just want to say to sum it up and then Mel, everything is conscious. To say that everything is conscious is not, underline not, the same as saying everything exists in consciousness. Right? Do you see that distinction? So they go to the example of the whirlpool or the waves. The waves are within the ocean. The movement of the wave is within the whole. The wave never exists outside the ocean. Everything exists in consciousness. It is consciousness. There's nothing separate from consciousness. All apparent form, thoughts, ideas, everything, it is all consciousness. There is nothing we can do to distance ourselves from consciousness. There is no separate person. There is no separate self. And essentially what they were saying is, as long as we think we're a separate self, and even after we realize we are not a separate self, that we are consciousness itself, our limited conceptual ability makes it very difficult for us to really perceive source beyond the limitations of our perception. Mel, thank you for raising your hand.
Oh, I kind of got lost again.
I know,
When you were
I
talking
know.
about we only perceive, and he talked about language because of the structure of language, our perception is limited. But then again, you come back to, well, who are we talking about here? If there's only consciousness, then consciousness is what's limiting itself. See what I'm saying? We're creating a person here who's limited, but actually it's all is consciousness. So if that's what's happening, that's just happening. And as you said,
Exactly.
yeah, and we talked about the whirlpool. So everything is movement. I see it as the waving of the ocean. It's all consciousness. It might be waving as an Amy, or it might be waving as a Cindy, or whatever, but it's all consciousness. And then I could not get this when Francis Lucille talked about the box. I couldn't figure that thought thing out. I don't know if anybody else, but the other one, where they talked about if you had a friend and you could get into you could experience all your friends' thoughts and feelings and perceptions. And I think the point he was making there was it's the same self in your friend that's experiencing. You can experience their thoughts, but that's the same consciousness experiencing thoughts just through another medium as we are. So I started to do a kind of a thing like, wow, I've always wanted to experience somebody else's body and just see what it feels like. That was always a trip I always wanted to experience. But when he was talking about that, I thought, wow, what would it be like to experience, like take somebody like Trump and just experience all the thoughts and feelings and emotions, and wow, what he just like a minute of his of being a Trump, experience that. But then you come back to like, wow, that's the same consciousness behind everything. And it kind of made me soften a little bit, that's the same consciousness in everybody. So that little piece was kind of valuable for me. So I think that was all.
Yeah, yeah. I loved the way I was challenged, and I love the way I watch their minds work. Like their minds work differently than the way mine work. My
Yeah,
mind. They
all of
love,
us.
yeah. Well, they love thinking up experiments to see whether what they think is true. Like that's just one way of knowing, right? They want to know whether what they think is true, so they make up experiments to see whether the experiments prove what they think they think.
And sometimes it can be so simple. I mean, it all boils down to everything is consciousness. And I think they just love the game, the process of analyzing and, speaking. But it really is
Yeah.
so simple in a sense.
It, it's
Yeah.
so simple. Like they talk about the interaction problem. Remember the interaction problem where essentially they say that there has to be, and this is where the Holy Spirit comes in again. There has to be a continuum within which everything exists. There has to be a common substrate, or we couldn't even communicate with each other, right? So no matter where you go with your separate experience, or no matter or your thought or whatever it is, you always have to ask yourself, or you can always ask yourself, what is aware of being aware of what's arising now, no matter what it is. What's aware of what's aware now? Because whatever is aware of what's aware has to be the container in which whatever is arising is arising. Wait, so Richard and then Patricia. Richard, are you saying Patricia can go? Okay, Patricia and then Richard.
Thank you, Richard. Well, all I know is this computer, which was sick yesterday, I went to the computer hospital, is now working. And I'm so grateful because I get to be here with all of you. And that now this computer is very alive. But it's only alive because you're here. That's my perception. And I choose to think that way. There you have it.
Okay, well, there'll be a quiz at the end to see whether you still think that way, Patricia. Oh, goodness me. Yeah, Richard,
Morning, everyone.
good morning.
Great discussion they had. I really enjoyed it. And where do I start? There's a lot here to what is reality? I guess when I started to wake up to my true identity, the question on my mind said was, what is reality? So some call it infinite consciousness or infinite awareness, or we label it. Some call it God. Some call it love. So what is it? I mean, my finite mind as a separate self wanted to know, because that's the way I was conditioned. I want to know in order to survive. Knowledge was very important in my conditioning. So the way I get knowledge about the world previous to my spiritual journey was to read about it or hear somebody talk about it. And then I had knowledge. And then I know. So what do I know about reality? Well, what I had to do, it worked for me anyway, so far. What is reality? Everybody's saying reality is infinite. It doesn't begin, it doesn't end, it just is. So, and what am I as a separate self? I am finite. I am dualistic. I experience myself in a dualistic framework of time, space, and form, which is illusory, which is not part of reality. Now, when I came to this point, I said, well, if my mind is finite and my experience in my life has been dualistic, then everything seems to have an opposite. If there's good, there's bad. If there's light, there's darkness. If there's finite, there must be infinite. So am I analyzing myself as a finite being and making infinite be reality? So I struggled with that for a couple of years. And so then I came across Abraham Hicks. And Abraham Hicks said, reality is not physical force energy. I went, oh, I can live with that. In other words, it's not a thing, because consciousness and awareness are words that indicate you're conscious of something external to yourself, and you're aware of something external to yourself, which then says you're back in the dualistic way of thinking. So if everything's one and only oneness is, there can be nothing other than oneness. Can't be another being or another entity or another thing. It has to be just easiness. So, and then what arises in this consciousness and this awareness is everything we experience arises in this unconditional, infinite awareness of stuff. So, are we all one? Yes. As they talked about in the tape. And they were talking about, for example, like we are on this program, we're all, in order to have this experience, we have to realize that within the dream, we're ones and zeros picked up by our cameras on our devices, put through an electric system of atoms and pluses and minuses, and then recollected by our computers or our iPads or phones, and then we're reassembled and we present ourselves as these images. But we're all the same. We're all different projections of the same mind, the same infinite awareness. So I thought it was very interesting, the way that obviously they're both with scientific background. So they come to their condition, he says, I need to analyze what is going on here so I can understand it. But I've come to the realization, if my idea is right, that the infinite is reality, and I'm a finite being, experiencing a finite world as a separate self, a dualistic finite world, that my mind can never understand infinity. Because if my mind were to understand infinity, I would no longer exist. So, because I would become infinite. And the same is true of the finite, infinite. If the infinite cannot understand the finite, because for infinite, understanding finite, it would disappear, it would become finite. So, can we prove any of this? What is God? What is reality? What is non-reality? What is dualistic? What is non-dual? We can't prove any of it. So I believe we have to accept the way of thinking that brings us the most ability to be the true self, whatever you perceive yourself to be. And hold on to that belief and do that and think that and say the things that bring you the most fulfilling manifestation of what you believe the true self to be. Love you all.
Thank you, Richard. Well, I guess that just about sums it up. Sandra.
Hi, I'll jump in. Good morning, good afternoon. I really enjoy this. I enjoyed listening. Always do. I love finding truth everywhere. It's one of my favorite hours of the week. But I had to listen to it a couple of times. And thank you, Amy, for that great synopsis of came in a little late, but I liked hearing what everybody had to say. I think it was Bernardo who started off saying about how you can't really take things apart to understand them. You know, take this and then try to analyze it. We're always trying to analyze. And then they proceeded to do that for an hour. Which,
the recombination problem.
Because that's how we communicate. Otherwise, we just sit in silence.
Yep.
And that might be fun too. They you know, I think what happens with me, and I think it happens with most people, even scientists, is we have confirmation bias. Like I listen, and when I hear the things that resonate with what I think is right, then I like that part. Or I think that's true. So I don't really know, but yeah, I call it mind candy, and I like mind candy. I'm not saying it facetiously. I think there's something in the human mind that likes figuring out puzzles and getting the answer. It's like, so the thing that I really resonated with the one single reality, no otherness. I think it was Francis Lucille who was saying that. And when I stop identifying with the separate self so much, I think I'm like saying that it's all one thing, even the separate self. But when I place my point of focus, my attention on the true love and reality that I know is true with all of us, and I know that even when we're talking to one another, we're communicating with much more than words. They did a great job of talking about how words are just symbols. But we understand each other because there's something else that's communicating beyond the words. And that's that mysterious, mystical part to spirituality where I am finding more comfort than in the analytical, intellectual part of it. And when he was talking about computers, he said something that really resonated. He said, he went into this long thing about how computers are programmed, and I had the opportunity in school once to take up a computer programming course. That was enlightening to see how you make the computer operate, and it was mind-boggling, all the little steps you have to take to get it to do something simple. And you realize that the computer does not do it. It's the person who's programming that's making it happen. And I loved what he said, is that it's just information processing, and that the meaning does not come from the computer program, no matter how sophisticated it is. And then he said something that I really loved. He says, the danger is that we start regarding ourselves as mechanisms, that we start regarding ourselves as computers. And I have that little worry myself sometimes when I hear things like we're just puppets or we're just computers. I heard somebody say we're just computers. And I know that's not true. I know that with the deepest part of my being that that's not true. So I was glad to hear him say that.
Yeah, that's kind of just a continuation of Newtonian physics, the clockwork universe.
Yeah. It's just, I can't explain it. I can't find a wonderful theorem or computer or, a logic sequence to explain it. I just know with all of my being, and see it in others as well, that there is just this exquisitely beautiful incarnation of all that is operating through these bodies. If you'd use the computer language, the decision trees, like there's like an infinite number of little branches that go off that create all of this diversity. And the source that's operating through it is bringing just all this love and beauty and wonder and awe and amazing innovations. It's beyond, you can see, I can't even describe it. It's just so amazing. And I know that the I that is speaking right now is much more than just some mechanistic, I don't know. Somebody help me with that. Somebody.
I can sort of jump in if I could.
I would love it, yeah.
Well,
because-
I love their language in a way because they have these little information packets in this special language that they speak.
Yeah.
So he called it, we are approaching the Turing test. And Turing was the guy that broke the code in Germany. He broke
Right.
the German code. An enormously skilled mathematician, but was just devastated because his sexual preference wasn't binary. And so he was literally destroyed because of that. But he basically was a major component in saving England in the Second World War. So he said, we're going to approach a point where computers become so human-like that we mistake them for people. And so Kastrup said, we are approaching the Turing test. And his fear was that we would, and he used this other term, he said, we're risking secular kenosis. Secular kenosis means looking at ourselves like we are nothing but computers. And
So
so-
don't you worry? I worry sometimes in these circles that we're in that we hear something like almost like that. You know, I'm not really deciding anything. Sorry to bring that up again, but we're just, it's not the I. I think what people are saying is it's not the separate, it's not that egoistic personality that's not deciding, but there is something, we are much more than that. We are everything that is. And we can feel it in ourselves. We can feel it in our enthusiasm. We can feel it in our love, in our wonder. And you know, when we're dancing to music, we can feel it. And there's something in me that just wants to keep expressing that and not allow us to think we're some kind of mechanism, you know, mechanistic doll that's being pulled on strings. So thanks for letting me express that again. I actually said the last time I said it, Sandra, stop saying that. But something won't let me stop. So I appreciate that you listen and at least try to understand what I'm saying. Even
Oh,
if I don't understand what I'm saying.
you're pretty understandable. I think we've got you. Yeah, we're on the same page. My goodness, you stimulated a lot of discussion. Cindy, and then Richard, and then Patricia, and then Mel.
All right, I'll be quick. First, the joy of individualization to me is being expressed in Michelle's square. Like, who else is feeling just nothing but joy and happiness as you see Michelle being held by her family? It's in the bottom right-hand corner. So I think that's phenomenal. And while you were, I don't ever want you to stop expressing, Sandra. And the last quote they used reminded me of that, the one eye of the world that looks out through all of the eyes. They used that quote, and that, like, I am my individuated expression of the whole, and I never not want to be me. And it makes me want to dance. So don't stop saying whatever it is you want to say. The second is, if you haven't seen it yet, The Imitation Game is a phenomenal movie. It's about Turing, and it, you know, expresses his brilliance and his sexual struggles. It's a fabulous movie. And I also wanted to say thank you for your opening, Amy. God is not in you, you are part of him. Both the guides and Joel Goldsmith, they say some version of what Cindy is an expression of God. This is God expressing itself. I will never express God. And the significance difference between the two is everything for me.
It's really big. Yeah.
I also at one point they just talked about it so briefly, but it lit me up. The desire to just stop and say, isn't it miraculous that we can talk to each other?
Yeah.
Like there was no explanation for that, right? And just that always makes that's an Einstein feeling. That's a Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana Maharshi. Just the acknowledgement that the fact that we're here communicating will never fully be understood from where I'm looking, and it's miraculous. And every opportunity I have to just say, isn't that like they talked about it? Like the fact that we're talking to each other, we don't understand how that works. Like, why is that happening? And isn't it phenomenal? And I just wanted to acknowledge that. And then there are other things here, but the other thing is I really liked the definition they gave of mind. I liked that. And it reminded me of Rupert Spira's I Am portal. Mind is a restriction, a restricted form of consciousness. It's like a tube that restricts its vision. It becomes a filter. So mind is the filter of consciousness. And so the consciousness comes through our individuation and whatever, we create all these beautiful like program stuff and that's the mind. And it was very, very useful for me to just sit with that and recognize, well, I'm still sitting with that. So with all the hands raised, I just really, I wanted to say I love us and thank you, for holding the space for this conversation. It's informing me in ways I don't even understand. So there you have it.
Thank you, Cindy. I told Cindy earlier that I think we could probably do 2 hours on this video. And because once we get into it, it's like, there's just no holds barred. I just want to say quickly, I loved, this kind of relates to Sandra and what Cindy said. I love Kastrup's use of terms like calling God nature. I kind of like that because it makes it alive. It makes it alive for me, like just enormous and unending and alive. And also his term, the crystal of eternity. That's what another thing he called God, the crystal of eternity, which addresses both Cindy and Sandra's points about individuality being an expression of the whole, right? It's like the same thing as diamond mind. But so just the crystal of eternity. We could use that term now, but just wanted to say that. And now, Richard, spotlight is on you, baby.
I wanted to comment on the phrase secular Gnosticism, whatever. But I perceive that to mean secular knowledge. And one of the things I remember writing a blog for Teachers of God Foundation a few years ago. And in there, I expressed my concern about the Enlightenment phase at the end of the 1700s. Kind of throughout religion and mythology, in light of now reason and science will be our way of determining what the nature of human beingness is. And with it, and somehow they forgot spirituality. So here we are in the 21st century.
Yeah.
We're having conversations about people becoming more atheistic than before because they don't want to assign themselves as intelligent beings to believing in religion or mysticism or mythology. And I've learned on my path that my question in my paper was what happened to spirituality? Did we throw the baby out with the bathwater? In other words, why didn't we evolve from religion and mysticism into spirituality as a more broad concept of a higher self? And without a higher self or a higher power, however you want to verbalize them, we don't have hope as a species. And in order to progress consciously, we have to have hope in our minds and our hearts. So the fact when I hear people talk about, well, those people are religious, dummies, they're in the past. And we are going forward as a non-religious society. I go, whoa, you don't know who you really are yet. So how can you make that determination? I had to go through my transformation as a spiritual being before I was able to realize that my intellect and my reasoning are not enough for me to understand what the hell is going on in my experience. So I really enjoyed that part of his talk for that reason.
Thank you, Richard. I did too. I put it in the chat. The term is kenosis, Kenosis. It's a renunciation of the divine nature. And that's a lot of what science did, right? And they talk about that when what does he say? He says, you know, what science does is we take everything apart, we separate it out and analyze it, and then we try to reconstruct it using only the parts, right? But the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's what we're returning to that. I think science is beginning to realize that is that in itself is not science has to see itself as part of a bigger picture. So thank you very much for that, Richard. Patricia. Glad you got your computer fixed.
I am so dependent on this damn computer, you know? One of the things, I'm a big science fiction fan, and I watch movies, science fiction movies. There was one movie that it really grabbed me. It was a movie about robots and how robots come alive and they become friends with humans, and humans become friends with robots. Mechanical object. When the robot dies, there are all these parts. They're electrical parts. When humans die, there are all these parts as well. Okay. I think you get my point there. But one of the things was that love came through, that these robots loved human beings. And the human beings loved the robots. So there was a real friendship. There was a compatibility, a simpatico that occurred. And when a human died, the robot was so sad. When the robot died, the human was so sad. So how does that make sense to what they were talking about? It's just an expansion of what they were saying, from my perspective. I mean, it was a brilliant video, and it requires being listened to 3 or 4 times for sure. So I assure you, I am not a robot, but I would love to have a robot as a friend. That probably will not happen. But it can happen in my imagination, this finite imagination. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have much time, but I just want to say that what you just brought up reminds me of something that they talked about early on. There's an interaction problem and a recombination problem. So the interaction problem, to summarize, it says we couldn't be having this conversation if there wasn't some fundamental ground of common being between everything, between all of us. So that's the interaction problem, is like can only interact in a common environment with itself, right? Or there has to be some love could be the term. There has to be something that brings it all together, and that's the Holy Spirit. And then the recombination problem. If you take everything apart, how do you make the sum of the parts equal the whole? That's the
Mhm.
recombination problem, right? So, and that's, I guess to me, when you were talking about the robots, it would have to be something beyond, well, I'm not even going to go there. It's the love, like you said. It's the
And
love.
it's love.
Love is the
It's like,
common.
and it's like the love we have here. Thank
Yeah.
you, Cindy. So I love you all.
Thank you. Mel.
I'll try to be quick too. But I kind of got from that AI is not conscious, that it's only the human program, it's the human input that is so it's not conscious in and of itself, but it's just human coming flowing through it. It's the programming that, so even with like a robot, or I guess, like we have Alexa, whatever, and it can talk to you, and they even use it for counseling now and all that. They can get it close enough. But is it really, there's a huge step to be, it's never the totality, which is all that it is. Okay. And I
Yeah.
just wanted, the other thing I was going to mention, if anybody has listened to Jenny Beals, she did about three sessions or 4 sessions, and she did one on Monday. And it's really, she does a very interesting, she does, experiments, science, which, she's a background in science. The last one was just on Monday was, do we really have freedom? And so I think she does say that the body mind is like a machine. So she does use that word, Sandy. She calls it that, but she says we're not that. We are the consciousness. We're always the consciousness. And at the relative level, there is no choice, because it's the totality that's moving everything. It's the totality, everything is happening by itself. It's the totality that's doing it all. But at the level of, the relative level, there is an H. So I just kind of see the distinction there. It's not that it's a machine, but it's all consciousness, and it's the whole totality moving everything. I don't know if that makes sense, but I would recommend her if anybody has access to listening to her sessions. They're really helpful and very simple. Thanks.
Yeah. Spot on. I don't think you'd find any disagreement there at all. Yeah. I really like the whirlpool analogy of the whirlpool in the ocean or the river or the lake, and that's all we are, is just a movement within, but we're never outside of it. We're never outside of what holds us, and it's impossible that we could be. We come and go. Yeah. Dago. Good morning, good afternoon. Did you finish your lunch?
Yes. Hi. How are you? How's everyone?
Glad to have you.
So great to be here. I just wanted to share that I just love just stopping everything. Just stopping everything and welcoming everything. Welcoming everything that is happening, because everything is here for me. Everything that is here, it's here for me. And when I can just stop and get quiet, put my hand on my heart, I don't care. I don't care about anything, because I am everything. And everything is God, and everything is love. And it doesn't even matter who's hearing me or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's here for me. So yeah, I love being here, and I love all of it. Yeah, so that's just, yeah, I just love just stopping, getting quiet, and just knowing this love that I am. It just, it's speechless. So, and I love being here with all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Indigo. We love having you here. We love being with you. I think you actually just summed up the entire conversation. So thank you for that. Yeah. Chuck, come to the table.
Thank you. Just real quick, I'm kind of overwhelmed by all of this, to be honest. But I just got a quick curiosity. One of the things I came across that blew me away and still does is, and I haven't heard it mentioned at all, though it came up at all, the holographic paradigm, which talks about the smallest piece contains everything that it is. Does anybody have any comments on that?
That's actually a really great subject. Yeah. The smallest contains the whole within itself. What strikes me about your comment is we have to be careful to make sure that we distinguish that that's what we started out with, Chuck, which is really actually a great ending to this, is God is not in you. You are part of God. So the hologram is not in me as a separate me. I am the hologram within itself. I have never been anything but the hologram. There is only the hologram, if you want to call it that. Crystal love, crystal reality, crystal nature. Yep. Anybody else?
I'll just say I kind of enjoyed watching them enjoy each other and their scientific discussion. And I remember being in education, I used to say to the mathematicians, you just love making things complicated. And they do. It's not, I'm not trying to disparage it in any way. It's fun for them. It's fun for them. And I used to say, let's make it simple for the kids. We don't have to make it so complicated. They think math is this like Chinese. And there was real resistance to that because then you belong to a club that understands. And so as I was listening to them, I just kept bringing it back to the very simple place of being and know that I don't have to speak that language. I don't have to be a part of that because all of my true knowing comes from within. And everything I need is accessible right here. I don't need someone else to figure it out for me or use words I don't understand. So I just was prompted to say that. But I don't mind them doing it. They're having fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I will be interested to hear what Cindy has to say, but I totally agree with that. Mathematics is another language. It's not a language that I speak, and it's a beautiful language. And science is an amazing way to look at things and take things apart and understand things. But we have to put them all back together again in spirit, not as separate objects, right?
It
Every-
can be used to obfuscate, and we don't want to be doing that, you know.
It's true. And I noticed that with some of the language that they used, like, you know, the I don't know, the interaction problem. I
Right.
get that. That's shorthand for a sort of philosophical way of thinking, and the recombination problem. I get that. But there could have been simpler ways that they could have talked about it. And that's
Let them do it. It's like, but just recognize what it is, and it's not the key to the universe. It's not.
right.
The
It's not a special group.
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kendall says, Kendall just said something. It's a Shakespeare play with all the accoutrements. Yes, it's all to do about nothing. That is, yes, yes, yes. Okay, Cindy, and then William.
One thing I don't think I heard anybody bring up
See you,
that
Pat.
that I've been sitting with too is this idea of I have this belief that what I am is not you, but I have a belief that what I am was at some point 5 years old. And I've really been sitting with that, this one pointing, like there's something here in the programming that says I was once a 5-year-old girl named Cindy. And somehow that feels real. But the idea that what I am is you doesn't. I don't have any answers for it. But this, I was looking at calling it the hook, because based on a lot of these, based on my current understanding of the teachings, is that, and I've direct experience, is that I should question my memories. There's nothing set in stone about my memories. They've been proven false many, many, many times. So this idea that I was ever 5 and I can identify with the 5-year-old, the idea that that's more real than the idea that you and I come from the same consciousness. And so therefore, we're different aspects of the one. There's something here that doesn't accept that. And it's in the programming, right? So again, no answers, but I love the inquiry into that. Yeah, so I just wanted to put it into the space, and that's it.
I have some thoughts about that, but let's hear from Mr. Hutchison. What you got for us?
I keep thinking of that grain of sand in the nothingness. And I wouldn't mind being a robot. I don't mind. It's this feeling of I'm okay just the way I am. Something about that. I don't have to be anything other than this little grain of sand or that weed over there in the culvert. And it's something so much bigger. I don't have to know, can't know the infinite. It's just that moment, I'm just part of this moment. I don't have to understand anything. It's and even feeling. And I love that statement that the mind is just a filter of limitation. It's just, and what I see, I've spent so much time trying to be a different grain of sand. And when I get it, don't even be the sand. It's just that it's this moment, something. It just reminds me growing up, resisting religion, God, all those concepts. And then finally coming across the idea of invisible. I don't have to see it, but it's there. It's there. I'm here. Something about just the moment, the moment, the moment. I just find so much, and so I use this word silence or stillness, but that's just another label. It's like when I let that go, and it's something about this moment being. I listen to all of and it's this flow, this like, oh, we're all swimming in this nice flow. All of us whirlpools, I love it. So all these images, and then I had this thought in Dago, because as you showed up on my screen, all I saw at times was a mouth and teeth, and it was opening and closing and opening and closing. Wow. When I'm not distracted by all the 5 sensory judgments about what I'm looking at or feeling or bleeding, just to let the moment speak. It's just like out of the mouth of babes. So I just love being that little grain of sand.
Wow. Oh gosh. What a great discussion. Thank you all. I'll turn it back to Cindy and wow.
Well, what I have is, man, I love us. Amy and I were talking before this meeting, and we were talking, there's this quote that they used towards the end, the one eye of the world that looks out through all of the eyes. And more what we're doing in an open door has that feel of that to me, especially as we take our turns facilitating these different meetings, and we're talking about starting other meetings. We're all an individuated expression of the one, and it's so stunningly gorgeous. Yeah. And so I have a lot of just, well, what I'm calling love and a tingle of excitement, because I literally, well, from a big standpoint, I don't know what's next. From a scheduling standpoint, I know we're getting together at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow for reality check. And with that, I'm going to turn the recorder off. Here we go.
I want to say thank you to Sandra for leading Training Wheels. I went to try to listen to it, but it isn't posted yet. But
It's posted now. There was it got delayed just because I turned the computer off before it was fully processed. And when I turned it on, I saw that. Press 2 more buttons and it's there now. But let me turn this off.